the official Formula One podcast. No, that's not it. I'm messing it up all the time. Your favorite Formula One podcast, favorite podcast. Anyway, my name is Nick Engvall. I'm with my guys, Rohit and Todd. We're going to talk about some liveries. We're going to talk about some F1 drama. And I'm going to let Todd start us off with some this day in F1 history.
All right. So I was randomly searching and I was like, I wonder what happened today on F1 history, because we're only 5 days away now from the actual season starting. And, you know, it's always good to revisit. But on this day in F1 history in the year 2000, Jenson Button narrowly avoided injury when his Williams hit a bird during testing in South Africa. He was traveling at over 160 miles an hour on the Kyalami track when the bird flew across his path and smashed into the car's airbox directly above Button's head. He immediately returned to the pits where he parked up the car completely unhurt. Could you imagine taking a beak to the dome at 160, even with a crash helmet on? I don't know if you survive that.
So is there footage of this? Is this like a Randy Johnson hitting the bird in spring training situation?
I don't know. I'll have to look into that, but I thought that was pretty crazy because we've seen animals get hit in the last decade or so, but it's usually like by a tire or a front wing or something like that.
I mean,
yeah,
I vaguely remember that happening when it happened, but I definitely don't remember the footage of it. Like it's pre like social internet, right? So you didn't have the like crazy viralness that you would have nowadays if that happened.
No, I mean,
so I don't think you're surviving, to be honest.
That's pre-Halo era too. So he's taking that straight to the dome.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I just think if that happened today, there'd be a PETA uproar. I think there would be protesters at the next event, not acknowledging the fact that it was the bird that flew into the airbox. But, you know, we live in different times. I just hope that, as Todd so eloquently put it, a beak to the dome, as your favorite rapper is going to cite that in the next 5 to 10 years. We just want the credit that Todd Yates came up with that first. Lyricist Lounge's own Todd Yates.
I am your favorite rapper's favorite rapper, so.
The real snowman. It works on 2 levels. Because he white.
Man.
White as the sun. So, yeah, nothing's been happening.
Yeah.
Couple of
relatively quiet.
Allegedly. Well, let's talk liveries now that we have all 10 out.
Yeah,
let's debate.
All right. We're going to pick on ESPN with this one because they, I mean, quite frankly, could have the worst livery take on the internet right now if we're being really honest about it. But F1 livery power rankings, the best and worst looks of 2024. All right. We're going to count them down from 10 to 1, and we're going to tear it apart the entire way, I'm assuming. So what do you guys think about Alpine's 2024 car?
I do agree with the blurb. This has a lot of potential. I kind of wish they would go old Racing Point and embrace the pink and not the stink of the black. But the other thing I also want to call out is this line around what does Alpine stand for and what is the point of this brand as it exists in Formula One today. I think they have to lean into the French side, and I think they should have gone red, white, and blue. But this is it that much different than last year? And if that is the case, I don't have high hopes for Alpine because they're going to get another between 4th to 6th position. 4th if they're extremely lucky and things just go horribly wrong for some other teams. 6th feels about right. So that's my whole thought on the Alpine livery.
Yeah, I actually really agree with Ro's point on that. They need to lean into the Frenchness of this car. And they kind of tried when they first went to this like aesthetic of livery with the BWT and like kind of trying to promote the Alpine brand when the back of the airbox tail, whatever you want to call it, the Coke bottle area, as they refer to it in F1, they had like the French flag kind of right at the tip there. And then they had the Alpine blue kind of more pronounced with the Alpine logo. That was like acceptable, but this is just like, hey, let's take that logo and then see, and as was the theme in all of the livery launches this year, it's like, how much paint can we take off while still kind of having it look like, what our aesthetic, well, like the aesthetic we want to follow for the team design, whatever. It's not offensive, but so I won't say that it's 10th, but it's not great, because this is one of the ones that's most affected by like, hey, let's strip off as much paint as we can.
It is offensive because it's so inoffensive. Like, I was going to ask you guys this: are we in the dark ages of liveries? Because this just feels like everybody has various levels of black on the livery, and that's it. Like, you can't really distinguish the cars that often because everybody's just decided we're going to make sure speed is the key, which is the sense. It's a racing league, but at the same time, there's no identity except for Ferrari and maybe Merc, and Red Bull. But I don't know. Nick, what are you thinking?
Like, I think they should just embrace the pink. I mean, it's popular. Every time they run the pink livery, or predominantly pink livery, they get a bunch of comments on it. You see on social, it's just like people like that look. But yeah, I do think it's kind of like an interesting, like the group of, this year seems to have, the group think of this year's, livery designers seem to have been like, embrace as much carbon fiber showing as you can. I like this. I mean, I like it, but it's not like, I wish it had more pink on it. I wish they would just go full pink, to be honest. And I think, it's not the worst. It's probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 on my list, because it's just like, I don't know, there's nothing that stands out about it to me.
They're not even giving us, like, the last, I think 2 years in a row, they gave us that all pink livery for at least the first 2 races.
Mm-hmm.
And now they didn't even bother. Granted, the season hasn't started yet, so we don't know for sure. And maybe they'll give us a pink livery during testing or something, but they're really stripping the paint off for that 1/1,000,000th of a second per lap.
Do you think that's actually what it is?
No, I think they, what do they say? Every kilogram of fuel is, God, what's the old saying? Every kilo of weight is 1/10 of a second per lap or something like that. They talk about it in driver interviews, like, if I have a big lunch, I could slow the car down, kind of thing. I don't remember what the equation is, but I think it's like a kilo of weight is 1/10 of a second per lap. But we talk in freedom units here on the Exhaust Notes podcast. So
I'm just waiting for the era where all the cars look nondescript and they're just going to have different colors projected on them once the race actually starts. And really, it's for all the people that are watching the cars live. They're the ones that won't be able to distinguish the cars, but we at home will, because of the magic of television. Because at this point, to your point,
that's a great point, Ro. You brought it up earlier too. Like, if we're watching an intense battle, like, we had a couple of races where there was like 3 or 4 cars all battling. Remember the Silverstone, was it last year or 2 years ago? The through goes Hamilton line. There was like 3 or 4 cars really tight right there. Imagine watching 4 black cars try to race each other close.
The other thing too that's really interesting is, like, how much should teams switch up, their livery from season to season? Obviously a lot of these teams didn't make many changes when it comes to sponsors. We'll get into more of them, but I think that there needs to be some sort of, either every exterior, piece needs to be painted, or some variation of that rule, because you're going to eventually get to the point where you're having, I mean, maybe they're already thinking about it now. Like, oh, we wanted to go as minimal as possible so we could save weight, in which case, props to Ferrari and Aston Martin for just being like, we're going full paint. All right, let's see. Number 9, Williams.
So I don't
know who wrote this article, but they could not be more wrong. This is one of the best liveries on the grid. And it's literally down to the Duracell airbox. Like, the rest of the car could be like hoop brown, and they have that airbox, and it's like, yep, that works. Like, the livery itself is cool. Like, they're still running with like the blue. I wish there was a bit of another pop of color because it's just kind of blue and black. But the details were pretty cool. They did like a tribute to the old Frank Williams racing logo up on the side of the Coke bottle area. So very subtle but cool. This one again isn't like offensive in any way, not super spectacular, but the airbox is the best gimmick in F1. So
yeah, and at this point, that gimmick should be worth its weight. And then also vault it up to at least top 5 status, because at least it's an identity. Duracell is a sponsor. Duracell is probably getting more bang for their buck than any other sponsor in terms of how they're placed, how they're colored on the car itself. Like, kudos to Williams for at least rewarding that one sponsor. And if I'm a sponsor looking to get into Formula One, I'm going to go up to a potential Formula One car that I'm looking to be sponsored on and just say, give me the Duracell look, because anything else will not suffice. I'm tired of carbon fiber. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. Just truly put my brand identity on there.
As far as liveries go, like, I think obviously the Duracell thing is just like a cool thing to like incorporate that look into the intake or whatever. But the the old logo, Frank Williams logo, is awesome. The fact that they've got the Gulf on there, I think is really dope too. Like, I could imagine that they're going to have some, special livery at some point that incorporates a little bit more of the Gulf, orange and blue. But, I think, like, as much as like I love the look of this car probably more than all the rest, it is a lot of black again. It's like there's just not a lot of color compared to what we would typically see in Formula One cars of, yesteryear. Because I think of, like, when I think about liveries, I think about like the I don't know, like some of the, like, the old, like, Marlboro cars, the Camel cigarettes cars, the Jordan Mugen cars of the early 2000s, late 90s, like, and obviously Ferrari, right? Pretty much always all red in some variation. So I don't know. I do hope that we get back to more. I don't know what the right way to say it is, like, because it's not aggressive. It does look aggressive when it's black and it's carbon showing and that, but it doesn't like, wow.
But Nick, it's one of those things. If half the grid has it, the aggressiveness gets diluted. Like, uniformity is not aggressive. Standardization is not aggressive. It's bland.
True.
It's boring.
Very true.
But
very true.
Unlike the others, now my beautiful lime green sun has come to the forefront.
Wait, I have to ask: do you actually like this logo or this livery?
It's grown on me, and I'm hoping it ushers in the Tron 3 sequel we've all been wanting for the last 25 years. And say what you will about it, at least it's distinct. Like, it's the old adage of, I think in professional wrestling, as in most aspects of life, love me or hate me, just don't be apathetic towards me. And this is the one thing that this car does better than anything. I have yet to find somebody on the internet or in our personal lives that says, you know what, meh, keep it moving. We're going to probably talk about this car more than any other just because of the sheer outrageous nature of it. And I'm okay with it because at least it's a memorable car in that way. And it might be the most memorable thing about the Sauber team this year, and that's fine.
I don't like this color of green at all. Like, I would pick any, like, you do this with any other color in the rainbow and I'm happier. But I mean, it is unmistakable compared to everything else on the grid, and I have to give them props for that.
Yeah, like the color blocking itself, especially from the side-on view, is awesome. It's potentially the best livery on the grid. I almost slipped up there because the green is so bad. I wanted to say grid green at the same time. The green is so bad, and I said this last episode. I think we both did. If it was like Volt or, like you just said, any other color. I don't care if it was like rainbow. Just take all of the other everywhere that's green and put rainbow, and it's the best livery on the grid. Or brown. It literally could be brown. I keep making brown poop jokes, whatever. The one thing I will say about this is that the wheel covers are painted in a very interesting way. I think Sauber last year had the best wheel covers too, but they look like almost like they're painted like Steelies, like old muscle car Steelies.
Yeah.
So I really like that. The best thing about this is that even in this article, they have just given up on the whole like 17 branding names F1 team, and they're just calling them Sauber, which I love. It's already steak, kick, whatever, McDonald's is already not being associated with this. So
I
good
thought
for
it
them.
was TurboTax, maybe Flubber. Like, I couldn't figure it out.
You know, it is kind of funny. This car probably says steak on it more than any other car has any name repeated at all. Front wing.
It's on the airbox. It's on the side
airbox, wing,
rear wing.
It's everywhere.
The Chinese brand that is sponsoring the team now because of Guan Yu Zhou on the wheel arches, that actually looks cool.
Yeah, I agree.
For some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I can't get past the color. This is definitely near the bottom for me. But I think if this was even like, you know, we don't have any yellow on the grid at all. Haven't had yellow in a while. So like maybe a bright yellow, to your point, Volt. I think that would be such a great move. But
you wouldn't think it'd be too much like old Renault?
Aggressive anyway, you know?
Mm-hmm. Fair.
It's at number 7.
I feel like that's decently accurate, actually. So for me, sorry, go Ro.
No, please.
For me, this is one of the first cars to launch again. Maybe it was the first. I can't remember, but let's strip it all and paint it, or, you know, keep it black or just raw carbon actually works the best for Haas because they're, again, like I said, distancing themselves from the toothpaste livery. And they've always had kind of a black themed car since their inception in 2014. It was like black and white or white and black, gold and black. They've always kind of had that. So for me, at least, it works the best here being mostly black. Except for when Mercedes did like the all black livery during, what was that, 2020? This makes sense to me. So it's like not offensive as it is on the other stripped down cars, but it's also kind of boring. So I think a 7 ranking is actually pretty accurate here.
I think it's probably the worst, but that's not necessarily anything other than just the muted color choices. And I get that they not only want to distance themselves from some of the sponsorship choices in the past that have dictated their color scheme, but a Haas car is a Haas car. And to me, they might be the most boring car on the grid, especially now that we don't have Gunther in our lives. So I really wish that they would have kind of swung for the fences in terms of their aesthetic, but it is what it is. I think they're also trying to convey that same attitude of, we are not trying to break the bank on any aspect of our car dynamics. So we are going to keep this black, white, and gray. And we'll see you next year where, if you're lucky, you might get an extra splash of red.
It's kind of like, so Todd is right. Like it's kind of on brand for Haas. So I guess they get some points for sticking with it. But it's so just like, it just feels lazy to me, I guess is the best way to put it. But
is the Haas chrome? Is the actual Haas logo on the side pod chrome?
I don't think so. Is it?
I don't think it was.
Like
that would be
in
interesting.
In that picture, it's making me look like it looks like there's reflections coming off of the Haas logo. I don't know. We'll have to look up deeper. But if that is chrome, couple extra points there because that's cool.
I think where, you know, like get into like reflective stuff, 3M stuff, any of that like metallic kind of color changing metallics that we could see. I mean, I'm sure that stuff is heavy for the Formula One, you know, teams, but I don't know.
That's a great call. But well, imagine if we had like a midnight purple F1 car.
That'd be beautiful, right? Like, yeah.
But it probably is like the amount of metallic material in the paint is probably heavy. 6, McLaren.
More papaya for me, please. That's all I ask. Like, they had a distinct identity, and I get that carbon seems to be the theme of this year's liveries, but I don't know. Everybody feels like they're regressing back to the mean. And we're like, let's have X amount of colors so that way people kind of know it's us. But as a brand and as a team in the last couple of years, they've been very much on the upswing, very much on the ascendancy. But this feels like a step in the other direction when it comes to the actual livery.
To begin with, but this is one of those cars that I just think you've got so much rich racing history with Bruce McLaren and the color, the papaya orange. Why not just go full on with it? Like I personally too would love to see more of the blue back in there that they had over the last few years, but I don't know. It's not a bad car, but it's just kind of like middle of the road for me because I don't think they made improvements by any means. I think they're just kind of like, just literally just plop right in the middle. Like this is probably my favorite team on the grid, but it's not an exciting livery in any way.
Probably you're going to jump ship, change loyalties because of a terrible livery.
No, but it's like I definitely am a Lewis fan. Yeah, I'll find ways to love every team on the grid, Todd. It's just who I am. I'm just a giant ball of emotion that
You keep that same energy when we get
He's
to Red
a traditional Mormonist when it comes to liveries and Formula One teams.
Polygamist?
Yeah, is that what the word is? I'm not a scientist. We'll just say this. Nick's nickname in the fantasy drafts this year will be Big Love for obvious and unobvious reasons.
Speaking of fantasy, I need to look into that. But keep your eyes peeled in the Discord and the F1 channel. I will be commissioning that again. Back to McLaren. This is the worst livery they've had since 2015, 2016. When Fernando was racing for them. But wait, was it 2016? I don't know. The GP2 engine era, that's famous radio now. When McLaren had the Honda engines and they were terrible. Sorry, Nick. This is offensive. Like, it's stripping the paint. It's worse than the Alpine stripping the paint and just saying, let's hit the pops of pink. Or let's keep it a little bit papaya so they know it's us, like Ro said. They have, I don't know who their title sponsor is, if it's OKX or Chrome, but they're both prominently featured. Do something with the 8-bitness of the OKX logo or the Chrome logo because you have all the color pops there, or just paint the car orange and give us hits of blue, like Nick said. Like,
so easy.
Do something, because this is offensive. This is definitely my favorite team on the grid. I don't like the color orange, other than being a McLaren fan. It's bad. I think I put it when we were ranking like at 8 or 7, something like that.
Is the chrome, aka the Simon Says wheels, are a really cool thing to me. I wish they lit up as they drove around the track like a Simon Says.
Well, they were testing those wheel covers like a year or so ago. You remember that?
Yeah. Yep.
If they could get into that and like everybody have them in its colors, like the team colors there, and theirs were just like, again, rainbow because it's spinning so fast, that'd be sick.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. We're definitely living in dark times where the thing we're clamoring most for each one of these teams is the wheel covers, something we don't actually see in the race itself. So, let's do better for 2025. Oh, I'll give you guys an extra year with these crappy liveries if you really deliver something cool in 2026. But this is just atrocious. And it was one of those things that I'll put this seed in your head right now, gentlemen. We have another show on the Nick Engvall cinematic universe called Sneaker History, and there's a popular segment called Rockin' and Coppin'. I want both of your answers for one rocking and one copping. There's one thing you would like to throw a rock at because of how bad it is, and the other one is one you would report to a police officer because of how atrocious it is. So I'll let you guys figure that out. But where are we next?
For Team Arby's, we have the meats.
So
man, I wish
I just had a thought before we before we get into the cash wrap, whatever this atrocity is, it's actually a beautiful car. But one thing that other racing bodies do really well is the nameplates and the identifying of who's in first, second, third, etc. So in endurance racing, Le Mans, type racing, like sports car racing in the United States, for years they've kind of bounced around in the way that they do it, but there was a couple of years where they had like those kind of LED, the number panels were like a LED color, and then they did one year where like those LEDs were different colors for first, second, and third. And then they've always had like indicator lights on the cars, so like you could see 1, 2, and 3. Like if there was a one light lit up, think like a 3-inch LED on the side pod of a car. If it has one light lit up there in first, if they have 2, they're in second, 3, they're in third. Maybe if Formula One is going to go down this path of like all these dark liveries, maybe they need to come up with some sort of, spice it up a bit with lights of some sort. I know we don't do
LED tracks.
All the races are. Yeah. I mean, let's just go full Tron. I'm totally down for that,
I mean, isn't this the weekend that the NBA is debuting the LED courts? Come on, Formula One, pay attention to that. Make it work. Because then think of all the sponsors you could put on the street itself.
Exactly.
Oh,
that's
I like that.
Call.
Actually, McLaren was testing that also with the little sponsor logos on the deck. Up near the driver that were like LED or like LCD, whatever, little screens that they could change out.
Yeah.
Man, imagine that.
I just want the Fig Newton sticker, like Ricky Bobby. We make that joke once a year. I do like Fig Newtons, but that is a dangerously large sticker on my windshield.
Yeah.
Put it over the visors. Spice it up. Visa right. Cash wrap. I can't not say cash wrap now. That's really funny that you said that because it's like retail. It just sounds like a retail thing.
The V-carb.
This is, to me, maybe I'll get flamed here, one of the best, if not the best, livery on the grid.
I could agree with that. It's distinctive.
It's up there.
It's distinctive.
Yeah.
That's all we're asking for.
It feels like Toro Rosso of old.
Yep.
And again, I think the Visa might be silver on this car, or chromish. But yeah, it stands out. It feels like what Haas should be, right? Red, white, and blue. Like, let Team America, fuck yeah. It feels like that.
Red Bull should be. Like, this looks like a Red Bull can. Like, why does Red Bull not actually look like a Red Bull can?
You just blew my mind with that question. How dare they?
If I'm Red Bull, like, you make your money from the drinks, right? Why not make you do it tastefully? It's not like your little Mini Cooper with the Red Bull can popping out of the back, driving around the U.S. Handing out free samples. But like it can look really cool to me. So I don't know. Like I do really like the way this looks. I feel like it's actually better than the Red Bull livery, because the Red Bull livery is, I mean, we'll see it, but like it hasn't changed much at all, and it's not bad, but like. I feel like the Red Bull, I'm always wanting that white livery that they did, a couple years ago or whatever it was.
For Japan?
For Suzuka, yeah.
Yeah, and this year they've been pushing it out because it's the 60th anniversary of Honda in Formula One, or in racing in general, or something like that, which was traditionally like the championship white color that, like those cars on the street ended up carrying on that tradition. But seems like a perfect time to like actually celebrate that rather than going back to the same old livery. But I digress.
No, I don't. I want you to digress because that livery is probably one of the best ones I've seen since my short time in Formula One. It's the gold standard that I hold every livery to since, and it's iconic. And as much as I like to dislike myself for saying this out loud, it is a champion's livery. Like, I wish they would have adopted that for a whole year after Verstappen's first championship, because I think it would have been the perfect FU. And the marketing, like, you're telling me Red Bull with all its different iterations of flavors, they couldn't come up with like a champion Red Bull, like a white cherry. But maybe that's stepping too much on Gatorade's corner, but I digress. See, I can do it too, Nick.
Exactly why it's a bummer that they didn't do it, right? Like, it should be more cohesive with the brand, in my opinion. I mean, I know that they have a gazillion people out there wearing Red Bull branded stuff and jumping out of, rocket ships and flying to, different, I don't know, wherever. But yeah, it's a good point. Like, the white could have been a really cool, like, stick it to everyone else after he won the championship.
And maybe it's not the best time to talk about sticking it to people, especially from a Red Bull perspective.
We'll get there.
Don't jump the gun.
Don't hit send already quite yet.
All right, let's talk Ferrari.
Ferrari.
How exciting is this?
Ferrari.
Yeah. I kind of like it. It's a set. Go ahead, Todd.
I was going to say, is it possible to like and dislike the stripes that they did?
Yes, because
at the same time,
I don't like them, but then sometimes I see it and I'm like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I feel like the stripes on the side pod are cool, but the stripes that they did on the inside of the wheel covers like mess it up somehow. I don't know. I think it's cool. Like, I think this is one of maybe the second best, third best livery.
Yeah.
Top three.
I don't know if it's top three for me, but I think I might have said this on the last episode. If not, I said it in the Discord, but I would love to see Ferrari embrace the black and just do red accents.
So we
did talk about that. Mm-hmm. On the last episode, we talked about what was it, Monza or whatever, when they did the black wing with the white logo, and that they did that, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So Nick, just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, you kind of want Ferrari to regress to everybody else's mean, where it's like they're okay to kind of have a predominantly black car with touches of red, because I kind of agree with it. I think this is the second year in a row where I really like the Ferrari livery. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like this red is a lot different than the usual Ferrari red that we've seen prior to this year and last year. And this red really works for me. So this is a top three thing for me. I also like the accents on the side of the white and yellow. And yeah, I mean, you're not going to fumble the bag that badly, even if you are Ferrari, when it comes to strategy, because the aesthetic will always be there and it's always going to be a beautiful looking car.
I think they have gotten a little, let's say, a little deeper on the color of red that they're using or choosing to use on the car compared to, the Schumacher era. But I think like the thing that comes to mind for me is like, if you took the steak livery, swap the red for the green and put it on the Ferrari car, like that to me would be killer. Like just enough red, make it brighter than this red maybe, but like, just it's, I think because it's Ferrari, it's also like more of a flex to go that direction, because it's so traditional to just stick with the 90% red, car that we see every year. Not that this one doesn't look a little bit better, I think, than last year, but yeah.
I have to disagree wholeheartedly.
Wow.
Because we were just going through the bottom half of the list, lambasting them for being assholes and making their cars mostly black. And Ferrari, being Ferrari, went fashion over function and said, here's our basically all red car. And then we're going to say, we wished it was mostly black. I understand what you're saying when you say, like, I wish they would break from the norm and give us something that wasn't an all red car. But because, and we really went off about the whole brand identity thing with Team Arby's, we have the meats. And they have brand identity more so than anybody in F1. They're the longest running team in F1. And you can't give them negatives for that. That's like impossible.
Think of it as like, we went fashion over function. I think of it as like old crotchety dudes at the top, and the intern that's designing the livery has tried 30 different variations to be like, can we just squeeze a little bit of different differentiation here? And each time he's rejected. So I'm just really pulling for that intern who has been like pushing to just do a little something different for Ferrari, you know?
You got stripes, okay? You got stripes.
I also think that it only works for Ferrari to revert to the black. Like everyone else, I don't feel like it works, right? It's like everybody's kind of just falling into line and not risking anything by doing black. Weight of paint aside, but because Ferrari is so traditional, like I would love to see them just be like, you know what, we're going to come out and just be. You think Helmet is Dr. Evil? We are Dr. Evil this year. It would change the way that people look at the team, I think, in terms of like, oh shit, maybe they are going to come back and pull something off.
I would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I keep cutting you off. I apologize.
No, it's
okay. If they painted the car black, completely black,
that'd be cool.
White logos, and it wasn't raw carbon, sure, break from the norm, do something like that. But if they gave us just a stripped carbon car like everybody else, I'd be pissed about it.
That's fair.
I'm not pissed about it because the other thing I've noticed is the detail inside the wheels. I'm going to forever refer to Ferrari from this point on as Team Ladybug because that shit looks like a ladybug to me.
I'll let you point that out.
And then with Lewis Hamilton, here's your $1 million idea from me. I have a series of books called Lulu and the Ladybug, and it's all about Lewis Hamilton's first year at Ferrari. You're welcome, Anita Driver.
First off, can you look at this and see anything that's changed? Aside from the design of the actual car itself.
Yes.
I feel like there's more yellow in this car than previous Red Bulls.
I would say less, actually.
Okay.
I feel like the Red Bull logo on the airbox that extends down the tail used to be bigger and come down the car farther.
Okay.
So like there was more red and yellow, like going down the Coke bottle area a little bit farther. So it was less navy blue, matte navy blue, whatever, and more red and yellow. But like we were saying with the Ferrari thing, like I for the first time in a long time, I'm like, this is a really good livery because they, one, painted the car, and two, they stick to their guns. They have brand identity probably second most out of any team on the grid, Ferrari being the first, like we just said. But this is unmistakable from, and Nick said it earlier, you can see somebody jumping out of a plane, jumping off a mountain, doing the Flugtag, racing a soapbox derby down a hill. You know that it's Red Bull. Their brand logo across everything that they do is the same. So I got to commend them for that.
Grid, they've nailed it. I just sent you guys a link that shows last year's car and this year's car on the F1 Instagram account. And there's just not much that's changed.
That's a fair comparison. Now that I see it side by side.
It's pretty crazy because I thought the exact same thing that you said when I first saw it. I was like, oh, cool. They took away some of the yellow. But then when you
slightly, like inches, we're talking.
Yeah.
A couple of inches bigger.
The actual Red Bull on the airbox has moved back a few inches to give more yellow to the actual inlet. But like other than that, I think the Honda logo got a little bit smaller on the back of the car. And almost everything else is identical. Which
even where they place the sponsors.
Even where they place the sponsors. Which, as much as it pains me to say this, if you're winning the way they won and the way they have been winning, don't fuck it up. Just put it back out there, new regs, and you're good. Like, I don't blame them for not changing it much.
Yeah, it even comes down to their driver numbers, where it's like, okay, you're one, you're 2 1s. Let's go. Like,
exactly.
They might be the most superstitious team on the grid.
I know that we're talking about liveries here, but we have to talk about the Red Bull design stuff real quick because it also feeds into why the livery looks cool. They basically, in some form or another, took the Merc Zero Pod idea and like flipped it on its head and did things that were from the Zero Pod design, took from that and put it on their car. So if this wins by a mile this year, this will be one of the most memorable liveries of all time.
I mean, again, like I have like, I'm not a Red Bull fan. I don't like Helmet. I don't like Max. I don't like Christian Horner, but I'm a Honda fan. Like I'm torn with these guys every year, where it's like I do want to see them. I don't want to see anybody win every year. Like I feel like that's Formula One though, so I'm kind of just over the idea that someone else can win. I feel like, well, what this is number. We're moving on to number 4 for Max, right? He's run 3 straight, so you know I expect it. But I also like I have to give him props for like sticking to the branding. I think that's one thing that teams don't really think about how valuable that is, because fans come and go. You know, the casual fans don't necessarily think about who was a sponsor last year, who was a sponsor the year before. But because Red Bull has been so consistent with their sponsors and with their color scheme and livery, it's pretty unforgettable seeing Oracle on the side pod. You know, like I feel like some of the other teams, yeah, like Haas has Haas on the side, but like I feel like that is something that goes even further back. I don't know when they changed, you know, when the last time it didn't say Oracle as the headline, as the top sponsor on the side pod, but
it was only a couple of years ago. Even
back to like the you know, when they were doing like the Infinity Aston Martin stuff, the color scheme was so close that, you know, you can be a fan of the team for a long time and not feel like you've missed out on something. Where a lot of the teams, it's like, wait, when was that year? What was that color? How come I have, you know, you're buying old merch thinking like that it's representing a particular driver, and it's like, no, that person left the team 4 years ago, but the merch is, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it is, and it's one of those things that I really like the color blocking, as has always been the case with my involvement in Formula One, because I think I've only seen one year where they're not as dominant as they are currently, and that navy and the yellow and the red just pair really nicely. It's just I'm sick of it now because I always see it on the podium, so we'll see.
There's one other thing episode about consistency on the Red Bull that I want to talk about, because this has been a thing that has bugged me for a while. Like, do you guys remember when Aston Martin became Aston Martin and they did the whole British Racing Green with the lime green hits? And then they had like that glaring, jarring JCB, shout out Canada logo.
Mm-hmm.
And the last couple of years, McLaren has been like that, because it's like, oh, we're a papaya, black, some blue car. And then we have like this kind of rainbow chrome logo. I think that those like clash too much to look good. But they kind of tied it in with the wheel covers, like you mentioned, Nick. But my point here is that one of the consistencies of Red Bull's logo has been the tag hewer. They've had tag way back in the like you mentioned, the Infinity Aston Martin days. They've had tag for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
But the giant tag hewer logo on the front of the wing looks awesome on the Red Bull logo.
Fits perfectly there.
Yeah. Sorry, that was it. We can move on to.
All right. Mercedes.
Copy paste everything we said about all the cars at the start of this segment, where it's just like there's more black than anything. It sucks because the silver bullets is kind of how I will remember Lewis Hamilton's time at Red Bull, or at Red Bull. Wow, talk about fantasy fiction at Mercedes. But I would think that they would give him a more memorable car to send him off in, because who's to say he doesn't win a race this year? And this bland for Mercedes car is not going to be a good enough indicator in my mind of, oh yeah, that was Lewis's last year.
Todd, correct me if I'm wrong. Last year was the only year Lewis did the bright yellow, right? Accents, or the bright greenish yellow.
Yeah.
So typically that's reserved for the second driver on a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which,
well, it's typical history. It's always been the second driver,
like
especially in Mercedes. It's always been, George when he came in. Before that, it was Valtteri.
Change to note is that we're obviously going away from Lewis having that as the like giving up that number one driver aesthetic that they've committed to the last decade or whatever. I do think this car looks better than last year's car, because last year's car was almost all black, right? So like the top half of this car has a little bit better, aside from the red on the intake with the Ineos logo, which I know is the Ineos, their company color. But like, that's the only thing I don't like about this car. Like, I would love to see a little bit more color on the side pods, or maybe, like on the front wing. But if you took off or just made that intake all silver, or that teal color, I feel like this car is like probably one of my favorite cars on the grid. But also because last year's was kind of boring with the all black, like we're kind of over the all black, as we've talked about at length with all these carbon cars this year.
The reason why this one is such a mix for me is because from certain angles it looks cool, from like the top down or rear 3/4 angle, it looks really cool. But I agree with you, Nick, like they need more silver arching onto the side pods, but those stripes kind of do fade back over the tops of the side pods, which is cool. But the reason why it feels like confusing is because we, like Ro mentioned, we think of Lewis's time in the Mercedes as the silver arrows. Like that's been their brand identity forever. And it was very cool. Like it was a cool logo or livery, sorry, over the times. But the departure from that, when they just did, we're going to do an all black car. One, they painted it all black. We'll keep harping on the carbon fiber. But two, this is just like, we're going to do a little bit of old and a little bit of new. We don't really know what to do. So for me, it turns out to be a negative. The one color pop with the Ineos logo, like you mentioned, actually kind of fits. I don't know why for me, but maybe I'm just getting used to it because they started that a few years ago. And before it was a little jarring, but this works, I guess. But I don't know. I would put this like middle of the pack because it's just, it feels like they didn't know what to do, and they were like, all right, we'll do a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's exactly that. They're stuck between two arrows, which is kind of a metaphor of what they are, because Lewis brought them to the dance, but now we are prepping. We're officially year one away from the post-Lewis era, and I do think we're going to see more of a brand identity with them next year, but maybe this is the fitting send-off after all, because like we can't quit you just yet, Lewis, even though the contract states next year will be the year.
Because last year's car was black, but it had the two stripes, kind of like the Ferrari down the side, right? And then even the intake, the red was a lot smaller last year. But this year, I think like there's the two views that actually make me really like this car are from the rear 3/4, the way the pod slopes down on the side, and that silver green kind of fade blend, whatever you call that, is just awesome. Like it should probably expand a little bit more, but I get that they're trying to have high contrast for all the sponsors, right? They're like, sponsors are white, we're only putting them on a black piece. The other view that actually makes me think silver arrow is from the front, just dead on nose, straight on. Looks so cool to me because it is just a silver arrow.
Better than calling them a silver bullet like I did. Shout out to Coors Light.
The Rockies are blue.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Wow.
We ready? Yeah. ESPN.
Did you write this list, Nick? Are you moonlighting?
Quotes in here that I almost spoke, that I haven't actually read this. I'm scrolling through it as we're recording, so I'm not reading it. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the Aston Martin livery this year. I mean, it's very similar to last year's too, but that green is at least unique on the grid, and they own it. And I got to give them props for that.
And it's a color that now, in my mind, is synonymous with Fernando Alonso. Probably not at the same level as Ferrari or McLaren, but that's the one thing about Nando. He always seems to have these distinct colors. And this is his green era in terms of, will he get a victory this year? Who's to say? But he'll at least look good trying to cross that line first.
I never would have associated British racing green with Fernando Alonso, but now I think that's burned into my head. I appreciate that.
It's what I do.
I like that they toned down the other pop of lime green even more this year, and it's just pretty much mostly that British racing green. I think it's one of the better logos solely for the fact that it's a mostly painted car, but I don't think it's super interesting, if that makes sense.
It's not, in the sense that they keep running this color back and thinking that's enough for the grid, and maybe it is, but yeah, show me a little bit of variety. We know you have a distinct color. Like, make some polka dots, make some racing stripes. I don't know, do a chevron or 2 or 3 or 5. They've gotten basically their creativity out in terms of sticking to this racing green, but after that, they're like, no, we're good.
That this year is that it is a little bit darker than last year's green, because last year's green was not so. British racing green is a darker color that you see on street cars, and this is closer to that, but it's definitely splashier, let's say. And I think the interesting thing and the most exciting thing about this too, I might be just brainwashed. I can't judge it now because I've seen it. Aston did a whole series of posts and videos and stuff that connected the street cars to the endurance cars to the Formula One car. And I feel like that is what a lot of these brands should be doing. We just went through and talked about, 10 different liveries tonight. And one of the biggest logos on the Mercedes car that none of us talked about is the AMG logo. AMG is the brand that sells performance Mercedes on the street, right? You buy a Mercedes performance car, it's going to be an AMG. It's like an M for a BMW, right? If you're going to say you're into the performance aspect of cars and own up to it, you're buying the M. And I think there's always a huge disconnect now between the Formula One teams and the cars that land on the street, even though most of the technology that gets developed for a Formula One car literally ends up in your street car 5 to 10 years from now. This sounds crazy saying it now because Formula One cars are so advanced, but the regenerative braking on a Toyota Prius in the 90s came from the Toyotas on the track and the endurance cars, the hybrid systems that were used. All of that stuff was tied together because that's how they developed the technologies to push us forward on the street. And I think that's a missing piece. I think that's also why I really enjoyed this livery specifically, is because it feels like it's actually connected to something tangible as a consumer, where the rest don't necessarily feel that way, other than the Red Bull, not even the Red Bull, the Cash App Red Bull, the V-Carb. What are we calling it?
V-Carb.
Yeah.
V-Carb.
RB. Yeah. RB.
We have the meats and the carbs.
One thing that, going further on that point, Nick, Aston Martin has a cool logo, the winged Aston Martin logo.
Yeah.
They could have done something super cool while putting think of Lance Stroll's helmet. Was it last year or the year before when he had the wings going around his helmet?
Mm-hmm.
They could have done something like that on this car and made it tie even further into the streetcar brand that is this team. And that's why I think it falls a little flat for me. I agree that it ties in. Aston Martin's color is that British racing green, but give us something tying it to the car brand. Like you said, the AMG logo, or if we ever get a Porsche team, they will feature the Porsche logo prominently. That's why it's not number one for me. All right. What is your top livery? So I guess, Nick, you said Aston.
Yeah, I think I'm going
favorite?
Aston. Yeah. I mean, I think the RB car is a close second. It's up there. Honestly, like, I think a lot of these are better than we've seen in the last like 5 to 10 years. Like, all of them are leveled up, even though, like, the teams are not
leveled up and stripped down.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, even thinking about the Alpine, right? Like, yes, I would love to see more pink or blue, to be honest, but at least it's done in a more aggressive way. I know we talked about it. It's like doing less is not necessarily aggressive, and going with what everybody's doing is not necessarily aggressive in any way, but it feels like there's more motion in these livery designs for some of these teams, where I think that's been missing in previous years.
Fair. Ro, what's your number one?
I'll go with the Ferrari. I'll go Williams 2. And you know what? Go ahead and give me Steak as number 3.
Wow. Hot takes. You're always good for them. The Steak, I'd have to put dead last. That color green is atrocious.
Yeah.
Atrocious.
Williams, I agree. Williams is up there.
To troll you guys.
Yeah, I think I'd have to go Team Arby's for number 1. Red Bull number 2, and then Aston number 3.
And truth be told, I really do like that Red Bull classic design, but this might be the only podium they don't win this year, so I'm going to stick to it.
Fair. Don't give them extra points. I like that.
Do we want to talk about it? Christian Horner, you've been a bad boy, but did he send those photos?
Did he? So, to dive into what Rohit's alluding to, there were new allegations that came out today. I think, again, from a Dutch newspaper that kind of said what we were all kind of thinking it was. The initial reports that he was being controlling in the workplace, which, we don't really know what that.
Not my Christian.
Yeah, I mean, an asshole in front of in charge of a Formula One team. Who would think? But this suggests that he was sending a female employee at Red Bull sexually suggestive texts, including possibly some pictures of Horner's horn dog.
Don't you finish that sentence, Todd? It could always be worse. It could have been Helmut Marko.
There's, again, this is, I think, the same source or same paper that initially broke the story on this investigation, but it's starting to feel like a little bit where there's smoke, there's fire, or somebody has like an absolute vendetta out for Christian Horner. What do you guys think? You think we're going to see the start of the season with Horn Dog at the helm?
I think we'll see him at the start of the season, because I don't expect this case to be wrapped up as quickly as we might expect it to. But then at the same time, I think the logical conclusion should, if not be commencing at the summer break, we should start to see the end game. But it is really something, because as we were talking about the previous episode, like, we were very careful not to listen to any of the allegations. We wanted to make sure we kept a cool head. We didn't accuse him of something that he may or may not have done, but this is not good. I think these are more than damning indictments. I think, like you said, there may be smoke, there may be fire, but it is something to me that, could this be the first sign of a quote unquote Red Bull downfall? Because it's, to me, Red Bull's dominance is, in my mind, equally Max Verstappen driven and Christian Horner led. And it would be very interesting to see what that looks like if you take out one of those principles, if not the principle, out of that equation.
Problem, right? And they mention it in the car launch. It's only going to become more of a distraction if it's not wrapped up and done in the next couple of weeks. So, to me, if there's any truth to this, I'm stepping away from the team until it's done. Because if he sticks with the team, then you're forcing the hand of owners, leadership, everyone above to say, do we want this guy here distracting Max or whomever, right? Like everyone on the team has a part to play, and anybody can be easily distracted. Because once there's fans, once there's media in the pits, in the, like walking around constantly asking, once you've got Drive to Survive cameras in your face, what are they going to do? They're going to be constantly talking about it because it's drama, right? And I think it's shitty. It's shitty if he did something. It's shitty if he didn't at this point. And the only real way for him to like kind of, I don't know, like I guess put the team ahead of his own personal stuff is to like remove himself from the equation for a while. And I just don't see a way for it to not be a big giant distraction moving forward. You're on mute.
Oh, we got him. You're on mute,
Yeah,
bro.
there we go. Thanks, Timo. That was my cat. I've been wanting to purr. But I was asking you guys off mic, if you will, do you see a scenario where there may not be any mention of this at all in a Drive to Survive type setting? Because it could be so against the brand. Because if there's one thing I've noticed about Drive to Survive, they like to keep their controversies on the track. Very rarely do we see any sort of mention of post-track or off-the-track activities.
I mean, for somewhat, like Haas was a lot of off the track.
Yeah.
We look like fucking wankers, door smash.
It still ties back to the performance on the track. Like, this is the first thing that there is no bearing on Red Bull's dominance in terms of affecting Christian Horner's judgment to allegedly send or not send those photos.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that if I was Red Bull in this situation, I would either not have the Drive to Survive cameras in there because that's just even more of a distraction and they're trying to dig up whatever, or two, say like, if any footage contains any discussion of this, we're not using it for the season. Like that's the only way you can have your cameras in our garage.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just going to compound the natural drama that like Nick was just talking about, the distraction
message too, right? I think if you're innocent, then the perception, I don't know if this is truth or not, but the perception is if you're like, I'm innocent, don't come in here with those cameras. You know what I mean? I'm just talking about public perception.
Yeah, but it's public perception. It's still damaging to the brand if there's discussions of that going on in the garage, around the paddock, whatever. Like, even if nothing happened, this is not a good look for Red Bull in any way.
Which is why I think
you wouldn't
it has to be remove him from the equation for a while, right? Like, I think saying, hey, the other part of that is like, you've already done that with Max for the first 3 years of Drive to Survive. We're supposed to get Max wholeheartedly, air quotes for those not watching, this season of Drive to Survive. But I think the public perception, I mean, it will be interesting because Road is right. Like, they don't go too far off with the narratives that happen alongside of all of this, or the drama outside of the paddock, let's say. But it will be interesting to see this season's Drive to Survive if there's anything about the Toto and Susie stuff that went on at the end of last season, because that will be kind of set the tone for, will they bring in the Christian Horner conversation? I don't think that there's an easy way out for Red Bull on this that isn't a giant distraction. I think that's like my ultimate point. It just feels like you either got to just say like, yo, take a 6-month vacation and come back when this is all done, or not, because any in between, anything with Christian being around, like there's only a handful of media people that are not going to ask those questions because they know that, like sometimes you have to play nice in order to get a little bit further into conversations with people when you're on the media side of things. But like, we're not going to see, Will Buxton trying to like back Christian Horner into a corner to answer the question, So it's almost like kind of pointless in a sense to even, have him there, I guess. But
Who would have thought Christian Horner acting like a hoe would possibly lead him to gardening leave?
I mean, the thing that keeps nagging at me is like F1 amongst all sports entities is notorious for covering up, brushing stuff under the rug, such horrible stuff that like I could see him walking around the paddock like nothing's a care in the world. All the higher ups, glad handing each other, and it's no issue. And we forget about it in a couple of months, regardless of what happens, until something is officially announced that they close the investigation and blah blah blah. I just don't think anything comes from this unless something comes from it soon, like preseason. In testing or whatever, they actually can him or he steps down or whatever. But if he takes leave, that just is everything. It was either the allegations were BS or they're just giving it time for him to come back and nobody care about it again. Because like all the other controversies, the whatchamacallit, Carlos
Sainz leaving.
No, the old boss of Renault / Nissan / whatever. He was doing like some sort of like money laundering scheme or something like that. Davide, God, I can't even say his name. No, Bravidze, I want to say his name was. He's got scandal. McLaren had the huge scandal back in the 2000s. There's just been, and Bernie Ecclestone, he's got like Nazi allegations and crazy shit. He just got convicted of money launder or not money launder. Was it tax evasion?
Yeah. I mean, he has like
and he's still walking around
of allegations, basically.
Like crazy stuff, right? And he still walks around the paddock like it's no big deal. So it's, the affluent sport where the rules don't apply the same regardless of what happens here. I don't see anything happening. Whether or not he comes out to be guilty or they settle out of court or whatever it is, unless Red Bull really, surprises us and does want to have like a be on the right side of history moment. If something actually happened, I don't see anything happening here.
I mean,
that's what I was going to ask you guys next. Like, what is the percentage that we see Christian Horner at the end of the Red Bull season hoisting the constructors title? In an official sense,
like none of this shit is true, right? Like first and foremost, I think that's like
for the latest sake.
Or if anything, like like we talked about in the last episode, sounds bad, but hopefully he was just a dick and not sending dick pics. Like that's like an easy line to be like, okay, yeah, he's a dick, and you worked with him. We've all worked with dicks before, but like if he's sending dick pics.
I'm sorry, I'm such a juvenile.
It's a different story, right? So, I would, I think we're going to know whether or not he's going to be around at the end of the season within the next month, and whether that's a temporary thing where he goes away for a while, or whether that's a temporary thing where he actually goes away and is in jail for a while, or whatever. That's not going to happen. But like whatever the case may be. We'll know fairly soon, and it'll just be a matter of like how they want to handle it and how much distance they need from him. But I do think. I mean, go ahead.
If this current report though is
last
true,
pretty damning.
Like this lady, whoever it is, saved for months on end text messages from Horner that. Again, it doesn't specifically mention pictures, but they were sexually suggestive texts. So maybe he was asking for the noodles. I don't know. But if she has this actual proof and he really did try to bribe her with like a couple hundred or
600,
like
600,000 pounds,
something. Yeah. There's no way getting out of that, right? Like,
but I mean, it's something you guys have kind of stressed that I've also picked up on as a relatively new viewer. if Formula One wants something to be covered up bad enough, they're going to be able to figure out how to do it. It just seems to be the MO of this sport, where they, unlike American sports, don't really like to vilify their drivers unless it's in that racing sense. So I could see them trying to move heaven and earth just to make sure that this gets resolved, even though that's not the right thing to do. And like Nick mentioned, I'm not holding my breath out that Red Bull or Formula One as a whole will be on the right side of history on this, but I would love to be proven wrong.
I was just going to say, I don't think we should. I think if we're going to talk about F1 scandals and potentially terrible people, we should at least shout out Flavio Briatore and, the Benetton and all of that. So
that's who I was thinking of,
sure.
Not Davide Pavlidze. Yeah, that's who I was thinking of.
Lots of good, not good, but like lots of shitty things happened around that gentleman. So, Formula One seems to be a cesspool of shadiness and terrible people, but unfortunately you have to have a shitload of money to race, and that usually comes with the territory with that type of person. So
yeah,
I don't know, you guys got anything?
We're 5-6 days away from Cars on Track,
and that means we're 10 days away from hot takes.
That's right.
Yeah. The hot takes.
Coming soon.
Hot takes with cool dudes.
Hot takes with cool dudes. Yeah.
And let us know in the comments, more specifically, hop in that first link in the Discord. Let us know what your livery rankings are. There's a handful of us in there that have already put our rankings in there. I didn't have the Red Bulls in mind, so I don't have to make too many changes. But we appreciate the conversation. So, but guys, let them know how they can find you outside of the podcast.
You can find me on Instagram at Rowan13. You can find me on X at Roheezy. You can find me on OnlyFans as the Malhotra Money Shot. Todd, where can they find you?
I don't even know. I can't. Instagram dadshoe.jpg. Threads, same thing. Twitter dadshoe_JPEG. Somewhere on OnlyFans. I can't even. Join the Discord. Save me.
Platforms. You can find me at Nick Engvall on all the platforms. But we appreciate you, and make sure you hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. We only got a handful of people on there so far. We set up the whole channel to do this, and we just rather have more of you join us and join the conversation.
If we get 10 more subscribers by the time the next episode starts taping, I'll stop doing the OnlyFans. And if we get 15 more, I'll continue them. Ball's in your court.
Catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Bring Gunter to Red Bull.